Time now for French Connections, our weekly look at the intricacies of life in France. This week, we're going to focus on the French capital. Paris is known for its postcard beauty, but in recent years, that's been somewhat spoiled by a surge in air pollution flow.
Indeed, Rochelle. Now, the common explanation is that Paris is located in kind of a bowl. They call it le bassin parisien, and so pollution essentially gets trapped over Paris, particularly in the winter when the weather is dry and cold. Now, sometimes the smog gets so bad that you can't even see the Eiffel Tower. Now, it's been a problem for decades, but it certainly has been drawing more attention than before. For instance, in 2015, Paris actually briefly topped the world charts for the cities with the worst air pollution, even beating Beijing, for instance. So it really drew a lot of attention at that time. But it's much more than just an eyesore. It actually has a high cost for public health, and that's true for the whole of France.
The cost of air pollution is estimated at 100 billion euros a year to treat people. It's a waste of resources, and 48,000 lives are lost each year because of air pollution. It has an extremely high cost.
Well, Flo, the City Hall has an arsenal of measures at its disposal to tackle pollution. Now, the Mayor Anne Hidalgo has made it no secret the main thing in her crosshairs is polluting vehicles.
Indeed, Anne Hidalgo wants to make Paris not into a postcard city, but a post-car city, and she means business. Now, recently, for instance, cars registered before the year 2000 were banned for the capital, and you can see she wants to ban all diesel cars by 2024. That's, of course, the year that Paris is going to host the Olympic Games. And then you can see by 2030, she wants all petrol cars out of the capital. In fact, recently, City Hall organized a day without cars in the capital to essentially test it out. Now, the idea is to dissuade people from using their cars and to encourage them to use cleaner forms of transport. And City Hall has big plans. For instance, it wants to convert taxis and buses into electric-powered vehicles. It wants to increase the number of terminals around the city where people can plug in their electric cars. City Hall also wants to boost schemes that offer short-term bike rentals, the Vélib system, the City Scoot, a rental system for scooters, and the electric car rental system, Autolib. All this should be boosted in the years to come. Also, the City Hall wants to increase the number of parking lots outside of Paris and increase fines for parking inside Paris.
Well, I think City Hall would be pleased with me. I don't drive in Paris. I prefer to walk. It's all too stressful driving on Parisian roads. All right, as it is, Hidalgo has already angered many drivers with her efforts to make Paris a much greener place. She's already put in place a controversial measure like pedestrianizing many stretches of the banks of the River Seine.
That's right. These are called the berges de Seine. It's such an important concept these days that it's our word du jour. It's become the symbol of what critics call Hidalgo's war on cars. And if you just mention the berges de Seine, someone is likely to have a very strong opinion about it. Now, it used to be that essentially there were two massive expressways that zipped through the city along the River Seine. First on the left bank and more recently on the right bank, those expressways became pedestrian. And so you can see these days bicycles and runners have replaced vehicles. Now, if you ask pedestrians and Paris authorities, they say it's a dream come true.
Now that the cars are gone, it's like being in the countryside in Paris. It's lovely.
We want to take back the city centre, to renew our relationship with the river and give the space back to the public.
I think it is a dream come true. I love strolling in those areas of Paris. But let me guess, car owners are not so pleased. Different story for them.
Different story indeed, because it's estimated that about 43,000 vehicles used to use those expressways. So if you ask people who drive cars, it's a nightmare.
It's a complete mess. Everybody who used to be on the highway down there is now stuck in traffic up here.
It's a decision made by an elite disconnected from reality.
It's not for the environment, it's for selfish Parisians.
I read a study that says that it hasn't changed much for pollution, but for traffic, it's a mess.
Paris without cars, why not without Parisians?
Now, the study that man mentioned was actually published by Air Paris, which is an independent organization that monitors air quality for the Ministry of the Environment. And it found that while air quality had improved along the river where there are no longer any cars, it had actually gotten worse where all the traffic has built up. So essentially, pollution was not eliminated, it was just displaced.
All right, well, despite criticism, Mayor Hidalgo is charging ahead with her plan, boosting public service, adding hundreds of kilometres of bike lanes.
You might have noticed there's construction everywhere in Paris these days. North, south, east, west. It seems like Paris is a huge construction site, and this has an incidence on traffic. You can see that in 2016, drivers in the greater Paris region spent on average 40 minutes a day stuck in traffic. That's 6.5 days a year, enough time to drive you crazy. And it could get worse because City Hall plans to make the whole Marais area pedestrian and perhaps even the area around the Champs-Élysées. So expect a lot more traffic. And in fact, traffic is already so bad that some people are already changing their habits, ditching their cars for bikes and public transport.
I sold my car to buy a bike. It's impossible. Driving in Paris is unbearable.
Drivers are just jealous because we go faster.
It's going to take me 40 minutes to get to my meeting. Before, it would have taken me an hour and a half with my car. I get my groceries delivered, and when I need a car, I rent one. And I know what I'm spending my money on.
Now, Flo, the Mayor Anne Hidalgo has said that personal car ownership is in fact archaic.
Indeed, and if you ask many Parisians, and particularly young Parisians, they actually don't own cars, and many of them don't even know how to drive. But that's the situation for Parisians. Critics say that the people who are actually going to suffer the most from a post-car Paris are actually people who live outside of Paris and come into Paris to work, because they're not coming in to enjoy the fresh air and go along a stroll along the River Seine. They're there to work, essentially. And critics say that, this is essentially going to cut central Paris off from its suburbs. That could be suicidal. But the dynamic between central Paris and the suburbs is something we're going to have to explore in another episode of French Connections.
All right, Flo, well, we look forward to that show, and that's all we have time for, I'm afraid. But don't forget, for our viewers, if you do want to see more French Connections, you can always log on to our website at france24.com.